The house on Chestnut Lane isn't just wood and nails to me, it's a living album of my life. It's the pencil mark on the kitchen doorframe charting my growth from a wobbly toddler to a girl too cool to be measured. It's the ancient oak tree in the backyard, its lowest branch still scarred from the rope swing my dad, Richard, hung for me when I was 7. It's the faint, rosy scent in the upstairs hallway that, for reasons no one can explain, has lingered for 3 decades. Every corner holds a memory, every floorboard creaks with a familiar, comforting groan. For my father, a quiet man who spent his life surrounded by the gentle rustle of pages as a librarian, this house was his sanctuary. For me, it was my anchor. For my mother, Sharon, it was something else entirely. I just didn't know it yet. The crisis began on a Tuesday. I had just come home from a long shift at the pharmacy, my feet aching and my mind still buzzing with prescriptions and patient consultations. I walked in to find my parents at the dining room table, a battlefield of scattered papers between them. My mother's face was pale and streaked with tears, a sight so rare it sent a jolt of alarm through my tired body. My father just stared at a single envelope, his shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" I asked, dropping my keys on the small entryway table. My mother looked up, her eyes wide with a practiced panic. Sharon had been a real estate agent before the market downturn a decade ago, and she still possessed a flair for the dramatic. "Oh, Maya, it's over. It's all over." "What's over?" I moved closer, my heart starting to pound. My father wouldn't look at me. He just slid the letter across the polished wood of the table. It was from a collections agency I'd never heard of, a dense block of text filled with menacing legal terms. I scanned it, my eyes catching on phrases like immediate payment, foreclosure proceedings, and a number that made the air leave my lungs. $280,000. "I don't understand," I whispered, looking from the letter to my father. "The mortgage was paid off. You told me you paid it off on your 25th anniversary." My father finally looked up, his eyes filled with a weary shame. "We had to take out a second mortgage, honey. A few years ago, some investments," he trailed off, gesturing vaguely. "Bad investments," my mother interjected, her voice sharp with self-pity. "The market, it was supposed to be a sure thing. We thought we could pay it back before anyone knew. We just wanted to build a little nest egg for our retirement for you." Her words were like a well-rehearsed script. She wrung her hands, casting a desperate look around the room, at the familiar floral wallpaper and the sturdy furniture my father had inherited from his parents. "They're going to take the house, Maya, our home. Everything we've ever worked for." The thought was a physical blow. This house, taken, the idea was inconceivable. This was the place I came back to for holidays, the place I knew would always be there. It was the backdrop to every happy memory I owned. Losing it would be like losing a part of myself. Over the next 2 days, the atmosphere in the house was thick with a suffocating despair. My mother would drift from room to room, touching the walls and furniture as if saying goodbye. She'd break down into quiet, shuddering sobs at random intervals. My father, on the other hand, retreated into himself. He sat in his worn armchair, the television off, just staring into space, a ghost in his own home. The weight of their combined misery was crushing, and I felt it settling squarely on my shoulders. I was their only child, the responsible one, the one who had always fixed things. It became clear, without anyone having to say it, that they were looking to me to fix this, too. $280,000. The number echoed in my head, a monstrous, taunting figure. It was almost the exact amount I had in my savings and investment accounts. I had started saving when I was 16, scooping ice cream for minimum wage. Through college, I'd worked 3 jobs, driven by a deep-seated fear of debt. As a pharmacist, I lived frugally, socking away a huge portion of every paycheck. My goal was to be financially independent, to maybe buy a small place of my own to travel. My entire adult life had been a careful, disciplined exercise in building a future. Now, in the space of a single conversation, that future was being threatened. To hand over that money would be to wipe out 15 years of hard work and sacrifice. It would mean setting my own life back to zero. I spent the night staring at my ceiling, a slideshow of memories playing in my mind. I saw myself on Christmas morning, barreling down the stairs to see what Santa had left under the tree. I saw myself in the backyard, my dad patiently teaching me how to throw a baseball, his voice calm and steady. I saw myself sitting at the kitchen table with my mom, the air thick with the smell of baking cookies, as she helped me with my homework. But when I focused on the memories with my mother, they felt different. She was always the center of them, the star of the show. Her laughter was the loudest, her stories the most dramatic. She loved the idea of family, the picture of it, but sometimes I wondered if she felt the quiet, steady substance of it the way my father and I did. There was always a restlessness about her, a sense of wanting more than what she had. I remembered her failed attempts at side businesses after she left real estate, a jewelry-making venture, a disastrous foray into online retail, each one leaving my father a little more stressed, a little more tired. Still, this was my family. This was my home. Could I really stand by and watch it all be taken away? Could I look my father in the eye as strangers put a for sale sign on the lawn he had meticulously cared for every weekend of my life? By morning, I had my answer. The house was more important. My father's peace of mind was more important. I would do it. When I told them my decision over a tense breakfast, my mother's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She flew out of her chair and wrapped me in a tight, suffocating hug, sobbing with gratitude. "Oh, Maya, you saved us. I knew you would. You're the best daughter in the world, I promise. We will pay you back every single penny somehow." My father's reaction was quieter, but it hit me harder. He simply looked at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears, and whispered, "You don't have to do this, honey." "I want to, Dad," I said, my voice firm, trying to convince myself as much as him. There was one person I knew I had to call. My mother's younger sister, my Aunt Isabel. While my mother was a creature of chaos and emotion, Isabel was a bastion of logic and order. She was a forensic accountant, a job that perfectly suited her meticulous, no-nonsense personality. I trusted her judgment more than anyone's. When I explained the situation, she was silent for a long moment. $280,000, she finally said, her voice flat. "And Sharon says it's a second mortgage." "Yes," I said, "some bad investments." "I see," Isabel said, though her tone suggested she saw more than I was telling her. "Maya, a transfer of that size is a significant financial event. You can't just write a check. There are tax implications, legal documentation. Let me help you. I'll draft the paperwork to make sure the payment is structured properly and sent directly to the collections agency. It's the only way to be sure it gets where it's supposed to go." Her offer was a life raft in a sea of uncertainty. "Oh, thank you, Izzy, that would be a huge help. Just send me the letter from the agency and their payment information," she said. "I'll handle the rest. We'll make sure this is done right." I felt a wave of relief. With Aunt Isabel involved, I knew it would be handled correctly. I was doing the right thing, and I was doing it the smart way. Aunt Isabel was as good as her word. Within a day, she had prepared a set of documents and arranged for a direct wire transfer. My role was simple: go to my bank, sign the papers, and authorize the transfer of my life's savings. The finality of the act was terrifying. I sat in my car in the bank's parking lot for 10 minutes, my hand trembling as I held the pen. This was it, the point of no return. I took a deep breath, walked inside, and signed my future away. When I got home, the transfer receipt in my purse felt like a lead weight. I handed it to my mother. She looked at the confirmation slip, at the long string of numbers followed by the word processed, and let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. "It's done," she breathed, clutching the paper to her chest as if it were a winning lottery ticket. "It's really done." That evening, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the house was filled with light and laughter. My mother insisted on celebrating. She ordered our favorite takeout, put on a record of old songs from my childhood, and even convinced my father to dance with her in the living room. It was a perfect performance of a happy, relieved family. "To Maya," she said, raising her glass of sparkling cider, her eyes shining. "My daughter, my hero, you saved our home. You saved us." My father smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in days. "Thank you, Maya, from the bottom of my heart." Watching them, I felt a swell of pride and love that pushed away the lingering ache of my empty bank account. This was why I did it. To see this joy on my father's face, to hear laughter in these halls again. The money was just paper. This was real. I had saved them. I had saved our home. We stayed up late, reminiscing about old family vacations and funny stories from my school days. My mother was more animated and charming than I had seen her in years. She was full of plans for the future. "We should repaint the kitchen, Richard, a nice sunny yellow. And Maya, we need to plant a new rose bush for you by the porch, a symbol of this new beginning." I went to bed that night feeling a profound sense of peace. The knot of anxiety that had been clenched in my stomach for days had finally dissolved. I had faced the biggest crisis of my family's life and solved it. We were safe. The house was safe. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt secure in the knowledge that I had done the right thing. I woke up the next morning to silence. Not the usual quiet of a suburban morning, but a deep, unnerving stillness. My father usually had the news on by 7 a.m., the low murmur of the television a constant backdrop to our mornings. Today, there was nothing. I got out of bed and went downstairs. The house was tidy, the takeout containers from last night gone, the glasses washed and put away. But it felt empty. "Dad," I called out. "Mom," my father appeared in the doorway of the living room. His face was ashen. "She's gone, Maya," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "What do you mean gone? Gone to the store?" He shook his head, holding out a single piece of notepaper. "She left this on her pillow. Her car is gone. Her suitcases are gone." I took the note from his trembling hand. It wasn't a letter, it was barely a paragraph. The handwriting was my mother's, a familiar, loopy script that suddenly looked alien. "I'm sorry, but I needed a fresh start. A real one. This was the only way I could get it. Don't try to find me, I'll be fine, be happy." Sharon I read it once, then twice, the words made no sense. A fresh start? The only way, what was she talking about? We had just had our fresh start, all of us together. "I don't understand," I said, looking at my dad. He looked utterly lost, like a man whose world had just been pulled out from under him. And then a cold, sickening thought began to creep into my mind. A thought so awful I tried to push it away. The money. I ran to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I grabbed my laptop, my hands fumbling as I typed in my bank's website. I logged into my account, the one I had drained just yesterday. The balance was, as expected, a few $100s. Then, with a sense of dread, I navigated to the wire transfer history. There it was, the transfer for $280,000. I looked at the details Aunt Isabel had so carefully arranged. It had been sent to the collections agency as instructed. But my blood ran cold when I looked closer at the recipient's information. My mother must have changed it at the last minute. She must have called Isabel or the bank with some story. The recipient wasn't a collections agency. It was a holding company I'd never heard of, one with a name that sounded vaguely exotic and utterly anonymous. She hadn't paid off a debt. She had taken the money, my money, all of it. She had vanished, and she had taken my entire life savings with her. The room began to spin. The celebration last night, her tears of gratitude, her promises to pay me back, her talk of a new beginning, it was all a lie. A carefully constructed, cruel, and devastating performance. She hadn't been celebrating that the house was saved. She had been celebrating that her plan had worked. I sank to the floor, the laptop sliding from my grasp. The silence of the house was no longer peaceful. It was menacing. Every familiar object, the floral wallpaper, the sturdy furniture, seemed to mock me. I hadn't saved our home. I had financed my own mother's escape from the life she clearly couldn't wait to leave behind. For the first hour, my father and I just sat in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my mother's betrayal. The note lay on the coffee table between us, a testament to a lifetime of deception we were only just beginning to comprehend. My father looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. The shame and worry from before were gone, replaced by a hollow, vacant look of pure heartbreak. "I should have known," he murmured, over and over. "I should have seen it." My shock was hardening into a cold, sharp-edged anger. How could she do this to us, to him, to me? But anger wouldn't provide answers. We needed to understand the full scope of the lie. "Dad, we need to call the mortgage company," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm and detached. "The original one. I need to know what was real and what wasn't." He nodded numbly. I found an old statement in his desk and dialed the number. After navigating the automated menu, I finally got a representative on the line. I explained that I was calling on behalf of my father, Richard, about the property on Chestnut Lane. "I need to check the status of the account," I said, my heart pounding. There was a threat of foreclosure from a third-party agency. The woman on the other end was quiet for a moment as she typed. "I can see the account for that property, ma'am," she said, her voice polite and professional. "But that account was closed 9 years ago. The mortgage on that home was paid in full." The words hit me with the force of a physical impact. "Paid in full, 9 years ago. Are you sure?" I whispered. "Yes, ma'am. There has been no outstanding debt on that property for nearly a decade. It's owned free and clear. I hung up the phone, the receiver slick with sweat in my hand. I looked at my father. The house was never in danger, I told him, the words tasting like ash. The mortgage was paid off years ago. There was no debt. There was no collections agency. She made it all up. That was the blow that finally broke him. My father, the quiet, stoic man who weathered every storm with a gentle resignation, finally crumpled. He buried his face in his hands and began to sob, not loudly, but with the deep, racking despair of a man who has realized his entire marriage was a lie. The $280,000 wasn't for the house. It was for her. It must have been for her own personal debts, things she had hidden from us for years. The failed businesses, the restlessness, it all started to click into place. She hadn't just lied about being in trouble. She had manufactured a crisis, weaponizing my love for my father and our home to solve a problem of her own making. She had looked us in the eyes, her own husband and daughter, and sold us a fantasy of shared disaster, all while plotting her grand escape. We spent the rest of the day piecing together the smaller deceptions. A credit card statement hidden in the back of her closet showed a maxed-out balance. A search of her computer history revealed visits to websites about offshore banking and expatriate life in countries with no extradition treaties. The lie wasn't just big, it was meticulous. She had been planning this for months, maybe even years. The house, my beautiful, safe, solid house, suddenly felt like a crime scene. A stage for the most elaborate and personal betrayal I could ever imagine. The woman I called my mother didn't just leave us. She had methodically, and with chilling foresight, robbed us of our money, our trust, and our shared past. My mind was a chaotic storm of grief and fury. I was picturing my mother on a beach somewhere, sipping a cocktail paid for with my future, when a single, clear thought cut through the noise. Aunt Isabel. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the screen. She answered on the second ring. Isabel, I choked out, the words tumbling over each other. She's gone. Mom's gone. She took the money. All of it, the debt was a lie, the house was never in danger, she just took it and ran. On the other end of the line, there was no gasp of shock, no panicked questions. There was only a calm, controlled silence. I know Maya, she finally said, her voice steady as a rock. I suspected as much. Her calmness was so jarring it stopped my tears cold. What, you knew? I didn't know, she corrected gently. But I suspected. When you told me the story, it didn't add up. Your mother has always been dramatic. And the vagueness about the debt, her refusal to let me see the original loan documents, it raised every red flag my profession has taught me to look for. So I took some precautions. I didn't understand. Precautions? What precautions? The money is gone, Izzy. No, Maya, it's not, she said, and I could almost hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. Listen to me very carefully. I never trusted that she would send the money to the right place. So I didn't structure the payment as a simple transfer to a third party. I told you I would draft paperwork, remember? Yes, I drafted a legally ironclad promissory note. The $280,000 was not a gift from you to your parents. It was a formal, fully documented loan from you, as an individual, directly to your mother, Sharon, as an individual. My head was spinning. A loan. But she'll never pay it back. She's gone. She won't have a choice, Isabel continued, her voice all business. The loan was secured against her half of the marital assets, specifically, her share of the equity in the house and her personal retirement accounts. Furthermore, the note included a very specific clause. The funds were designated exclusively for the purpose of clearing a mortgage lien with a specific, and as we now know, fictional financial institution. By taking that money and using it for another purpose, in this case, absconding with it, she didn't just violate the terms of the loan, she committed wire fraud. It took a moment for the weight of her words to sink in. Wire fraud. Secured loan. When she transferred that money to the offshore holding company instead of the designated creditor, Isabel explained, she triggered an immediate default and recall clause in the loan agreement. Every dollar of that transfer left a digital footprint. As a forensic accountant, finding that footprint is what I do for a living. The moment you hung up the phone with the mortgage company, I initiated the legal process. I leaned against the wall, my knees weak. Your mother thinks she's free, Aunt Isabel said, her voice cold and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. She's not. She's tethered to that money. We can trace it, we can freeze the accounts, and we can use the fraud charge to legally enforce the lien against her assets here. She can't sell her half of the house. She can't touch her retirement funds. In effect, Maya, you didn't give her your money. You bought her share of the family assets. She ran away with cash, but she left everything of real, tangible value behind, and it now legally belongs to you. A sound escaped my lips. It started as a choked sob, but then it morphed and twisted into something else entirely. The sheer, diabolical brilliance of it, the cold, hard legal trap that my logical, meticulous aunt had laid. My mother, the master performer, thought she had pulled off the ultimate deception, but she had been outsmarted. She had walked right into a cage of her own making. The sound bubbling up from my chest was laughter. It was a wild, hysterical, tear-soaked laugh of pure, unadulterated relief. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost a mother I never really knew, but I had saved my father and secured our home in the most permanent way imaginable. My mother didn't get away with it. And that's when I laughed. The days that followed were a strange mixture of legal activity and quiet healing. Aunt Isabel moved with terrifying efficiency. Faxes were sent, lawyers were engaged, and digital trails were followed. It turned out the holding company my mother had used was a poorly established shell corporation, a classic amateur move. Within a week, the foreign accounts were frozen. My mother was located in a small coastal town in Belize, her fresh start brought to an abrupt and screeching halt. She was not forced to come back. There were no dramatic courtroom showdowns. The beauty of Isabel's plan was that it didn't require her cooperation. The fraud charge and the default on the loan were all the legal leverage we needed, presented with the evidence by a local correspondent lawyer. And with her newfound cash inaccessible, Sharon was forced to sign over her legal claim to the house and her retirement funds to satisfy the debt she owed me. In the end, I owned my childhood home, free and clear. My life savings were gone, but they had been converted into a solid, real asset. The hardest part was watching my father navigate his own grief. He wandered through the house like a man searching for a ghost. He wasn't mourning the woman who left, but the woman he thought he had been married to for 35 years. Was any of it real? He asked me one evening as we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The good parts were real to you, Dad, I said, putting my hand on his. And they were real to me, that's what matters. Slowly, very slowly, the light started to come back into his eyes. We found a new rhythm, just the two of us. We painted the kitchen, not a sunny yellow, but a calm, peaceful blue. We worked in the garden together, pulling weeds and planting new flowers. We cleared out my mother's things, boxing up the life she had abandoned, and in doing so, we made the house truly ours. I never heard from Sharon directly. Aunt Isabel handled all communication through lawyers. There was no apology, no explanation, just a signature on a piece of paper that relinquished her past. I realized that the mother I loved had been a character she played, and when the role no longer suited her, she simply walked off the stage. The laugh I had that day was a turning point. It wasn't a laugh of joy or humor, but of liberation. It was the sound of a devastating weight being lifted. I had been betrayed in the most profound way possible, but I had not been broken. My mother had tried to steal my future, but thanks to the quiet brilliance of my aunt and the strength I found within myself, she had only managed to steal her own. I had my father, I had my home, and I had a future I would now rebuild on a foundation of truth, not lies. And that was worth more than any amount of money. So I have to ask you, the listeners, what would you have done? Would you have seen the warning signs I missed? Family dynamics are incredibly complex, and when love and obligation are mixed with deception, it can be almost impossible to see the truth that's right in front of you. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We learn that family can be our greatest strength, but sometimes also our deepest source of pain. In the end, we are all human, navigating the complicated tapestry of relationships and trust. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with someone who might appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.